25th, 1887.
Susan Miller.
Pierre Troadec, born in Brittany, France, on June 26, 1909.
What do you remember about your home? Imagine you're looking at an album with old photographs. What
Should
do
I
you...
start with the war, or pre-war maybe a little bit?
Yes, that would be a good place.
Well, when the war broke out in August 1939, I was working on a ship. My ship was in New York. I was on board the Normandie, probably you've heard of that ship. And we arrived in New York a few days before the war was declared. And we couldn't return to France because we were expecting the war to start any moment. So there was a German ship, I think it was the Bremen or the Europa. Then one of the Queen, either the Queen Mary, I think. Then us, the Normandie, and another British and another Italian ship, all docked on Pier 88 in New York, waiting. And then finally the war broke out, I think on the 2nd or 3rd or 4th of August, I can't remember exactly. So the German ship left, and we waited another 2 weeks until the French government gave us the okay to return to France. And finally we boarded a train in Pennsylvania. We were taken to Halifax, the whole crew, I mean three-quarters of the crew of the Normandie. And we went to Halifax and we stayed there for about 2 weeks. The war was on. The Germans had started their offensive in Poland. The French had mobilized, and the British also. The whole thing was going on, and we were still stuck around Halifax.
Were you surprised that this happened?
No. We were expecting it. See, beginning in July, all the Americans started to leave Paris. They were coming back to the United States. No, you could feel the atmosphere was... the only thing we thought until the last moment that maybe something would happen that would make it impossible, but Hitler had decided, that was in his plan long ago. It was impossible to stop. There's no way. So we finally crossed the Atlantic. We were the first convoy to cross the Atlantic with no protection whatsoever. So anyhow, we were 2 French boats and 3 British boats, 5 boats altogether, and we crossed the Atlantic. And when we arrived in France, it seems to be very peaceful. Mobilization was on, everybody was dressed in uniform, but the war was on, but there was no action. See, the French were on their side, the Germans were on the other side. And so we waited like this. I joined my regiment. I had to do the service. See, when the war is declared, everyone knows where to go. He's on his regiment. So I joined my regiment, who luckily happens to be in the same town where I was living, in Le Havre. See, my ship was landing in Le Havre. And so I joined my regiment, but I had no place for us to do anything because there was really no fighting. So I spent 2 months, 3 months maybe in Le Havre. And then by the end of February 1940, apparently the French High Command had they knew that the Germans would know where they would probably, so they sent all my division sent back to the north of France on the border. And we said, doing nothing, really nothing. And all the time, we didn't know why they were going to attack. So they attacked up the Maginot Line, they attacked from Belgium, they attacked from Holland, they attacked from the north, they attacked from the east, and we were caught, and, so they as you probably know, they encircled all the French army and the British army, who had to flee toward Dunkirk, and we were in the middle, so my division, or my regiment, what was left of my division, would pull to the south. And finally, we were caught prisoners of war. We were, about 2 million of soldiers were caught in that. The attack was terrible, terrific, The Stukas, they had those Stuka planes, they had those tanks, they had their plane. Hitler was prepared for a big fight, and we were not. And it's okay, we are prisoners of war. But
do you remember that day?
Oh yes.
Could you describe it in detail?
Well, it was, I think, May, the attacks in May, or on the 10th or 12th of May, I would say. I'm in a town in France, I don't even remember the name, close to the Belgian border. And the attack came early in the morning, and by the afternoon, the plane, the Stukas had come over, bombed and everything. We were unable to fight back. We didn't have enough anti-aircraft because they had a kind of aircraft they have we've never seen before. Instead of flying this way, they flew this way. And we were not prepared to anti-aircraft gun were not prepared for that kind of flight. So anyhow, by the end of the afternoon, on the 12th of May, we were encircled completely. We were told to give us our equipment, arms and everything. But there were so many of us, and the Germans were going so fast they didn't have enough men to guard us, you see. So we were in a big, in the countryside, with cows and everything in the meadows, and we were, I don't know, 3, 4, 5,000 men there. After we had given our equipment, we were told that we were prisoners of war, we have to stay there. But I said to myself after a day or two, I said, but Jim, my gosh, there's nothing around here. I said, couple of guys, what do we do? We go. Some people say, oh, no, this. I said, okay, you do what you want, I go. Yeah? It was easy, because a week after I left, I was told that they had barbed wires all over. So if I had waited another week, maybe it would have been different. So anyhow, I left.
By yourself?
By myself. And the first house that I could find a few miles away from there, I went to there, I explained my case, took off my uniform, they gave me a civilian suit, whatever, just a suit, I guess. And I drove back. But I didn't know where my wife was. I had no idea where she was, because she was living in Le Havre that bombarded every day by the German, by the British. I had a little girl, 6 months old. So I finally find myself with all the refugees of France. There was millions of refugees coming from Holland, from Belgium, all coming south, fleeing in front of the Germans.
Where were they heading?
Anywhere. You're free. You know the enemy's behind you. They were afraid. Most of the Belgian people had been through the First World War, and they were scared of the Germans, very scared. They had seen through, they knew what the occupation was. So they were, the poor people, everybody was running on, going south. Didn't know where. Millions of people on the road. I found myself among them, and I finally ended in the south of France. Now, the armistice came in June, beginning of June. So the armistice stopped fighting. But I don't know where my wife is. I don't know why my baby is with her. I have no idea. So finally, the Germans made a demarcation line. I don't know if you've heard of it. They cut France in two. So I was in the unoccupied zone, and my wife was in the occupied zone. And you couldn't go across one zone from another. You needed special permits. So anyhow, we didn't. So I waited about June, July, August, September, 4 months before they decided to let us go through the line and back to our family. So I finally find my wife and my little baby in a small town called Chateaubriand.
How were you able to locate them?
Well, first I went to Le Havre. I went back to Le Havre to see if she was there. But then, of course, my house was empty. And a neighbor told me, we saw Madame Troadec, we saw her, she left. I didn't know how she got it. She made it because to leave Le Havre, I don't know if you have an idea where Le Havre is, you have the Seine River, and there's no bridge. So she must have been alongside the river, and then finally there's a little ferry boat, and then she told me that she was taken over by some British soldiers in a truck. They were fleeing also, the British. So they took my wife and the baby, and also a lot of other people, but my wife and baby in a truck for, I don't know, maybe 100 miles. And then she walked another 50 miles, and finally she made it to Chateaubriand. And the reason she went to Chateaubriand is because her family came from there. So at least she had a refuge. Uncles and also for farmers. So after I went to Le Havre, and I knew that I saw that she wasn't there, I took a train and I went to Chateaubriand myself. And Chateaubriand became famous, I mentioned it, in 1941, because in October, a German officer was killed apparently by resistance, but it was never proven. But he was found dead in a street in Nantes. Nantes is about 30 miles west of Chateaubriand. So the following morning, the Nazis on radio said, if the people responsible for the death of Colonel, I don't remember, are not found, we'll kill 100 hostages. And of course, after 48 hours, nobody showed up. So they decided to kill 100 hostages. Where to take them? They took 50 of them in Bordeaux, they took 23 in Nantes, and they took the 27 in Chateaubriand. First, I must say, they were not citizens of the town. They were detainees. They were people that the French government had put aside, communist people that were against the government at the time. So they were in a camp in Chateaubriand, and they were selected. The German and the French had to obey the order. They had to decide who was going to be shot. So they took 27 hostages. That was on the 22nd of October, 1941. No trials, no nothing. They picked another 27, they drove them across the town, and they shot them in a quarry. Now, that particular day, when it happened, these men left the camp, go to their death, because they knew what was going to happen to them. And they were singing. And this is, to me, I think was the most important part of my whole sitting, because when I heard these guys going to that singing the Marseillaise and whatever sounds, and I was working in the city hall at the time, which I cleaned. We came out of city hall and we saw them pass in front of us. There was a truck full of German with their rifles like this. Then came the truck with those 27 guys, then another truck with the German soldiers. And I was really upset, shocked, you know. And I decided I'm not going to work today. And most of the city did the same thing. There was the whole town, because while they were singing, those 27 men, all the other guys, a couple of hundred guys in the camp, were singing also. And imagine a couple of hundred people singing, and Chateaubriand is a curve in a valley like this. So the noise, you could hear those voices singing the Marseillaise and whatever singing. And nobody could work that day. No, everybody was sad. I said, I'm going to follow those trucks. Took my bike, I followed them at a distance. I could hear them sing, so I knew everybody. And then in the morning, around 12 o'clock, I guess, I was stopped. A German officer, soldiers stopped me. Couldn't go any further. So okay, stop there. I put my bicycle in the bush, and I waited for a while, and I could still hear them sing. That's the thing. That song was continuously. And then all of a sudden, about 15, 20 minutes after I was there, I heard a first pow, a first, what do you say, salvo, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, this is it, this is the first shot. And then I still hear the voice, the other guy still singing. Then about 10 minutes after, I heard another shot. And then I still hear the last one singing. And then finally, there's a third salvo, and that's it, it's over. Now, I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm going to wait. So I waited and waited, maybe three-quarters of an hour. Finally, the German guard was gone, so I suppose I said, everybody's gone. And sure enough, everybody was gone. Finally, I went through the bushes, and I finally arrived where they had been shot. Now, there was 9, because I have to explain to you that the Nazis are very systematic. Everything has to be done this way and this way. 3 times 9 makes 27, okay? So you had 9 pillars, wooden pillars, you know. And when I got there, I still remember like it was yesterday, the blood, you know, where it had fallen, the blood was there in the sand. It's a quarry, so the sand. And at the back of them, in the bushes, I could see part of their clothes, because apparently they had used dum-dum bullets that explode. See? So when the bullet went through them, part of their clothes were still hanging around the bushes. And I was all alone there. There was a farm up to, not far from here, but the Germans locked them up. So I stayed, I looked at those 9 poteaux, as we call it. I saw the blood all over, I saw the pieces of land, and I came back. I said, I have to go back to town now. So all I had to do was to follow the trace of blood. The blood was dripping from the truck. They would pile up on top of one another, but with the bullets, the wound. So I followed them to go back to Chateaubriand, about 3 miles away. For 3 miles, all I had to do was to follow the trace with the blood on the street. And I finally arrived in Chateaubriand. There is an old castle there, and that's where they were being put temporarily. So I entered the old castle. I saw the gendarme, a French gendarme. I said, well, where are they? He says, they are over there in a place special. And what are going to happen? He says, they're going to be buried. The order has to be buried in 9 different communes, different villages. 3 times 9, 7, always the same thing. So they were buried, 3 in one village, 3 in another village, and so forth and so on. So they're still there right now. But every year there's a pilgrimage at the quarry. There's a big monument, and with their names on, their pictures, and everything. So this is so that day I think probably I was already doing a little bit of resistance work, but nothing really. And it really turned me on that day. I knew that this was not a joke. This was serious. This was a serious thing to. But before that, when I arrived in Chateaubriand, after a few weeks, I went to the mayor of the town and I said, Mr. Mayor, I'm a displaced person. I come from Le Havre, and my wife, and I have a child. And I said, I'm offering my service if you want help, because of course there were so many refugees. You had to feed them, you had to give them final apartment. I said, I'm at your disposal. So after a while I was introduced to the man in charge, and I was given the job as taking care of the food, because we had rations, rations, everything was the food cards. And I started to do some monkey business, let's put it this way. Anybody that wanted a false identity papers, he came to Pierre. I was called the American after a while, because everybody knew that my wife was brought up in America, even though she was French, but she was half-half. I had met my wife, I forgot to tell you that, I had met my wife the first time when I stayed in America in 1928 or 29. And I had met this young girl here. She'd been here for a few years before, her parents, and I had met her. But I was not too young at the time. I was only 19 or 20 years old. Never thought that one day, she could become my wife. And, okay, we were married in 1936 in New York. Right? So that's why everybody knew in Chateaubriand that Pierre was on the Normandy and blah, 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 because I never accepted the defeat of France. I knew deep down that this was only temporary. I knew that Hitler he could win a lot, but sooner or later, I knew, because I knew America. I knew the potential. I had visited here. I was one of the few Frenchmen that came out of his country, because in those days, very few people traveled out of that country, in France, especially. They couldn't afford, there was no airplane in those days. So, very few people could afford a trip to New York. It was very expensive. But being a sailor, being a seaman, I was here every 3 weeks. And I knew I'd been through the Depression. I'd seen the Depression in America in 1928, 29, 30. Then I went back on the ship, and then every 3 weeks my ship was in New York. So I had an idea that the potential of America was fantastic. So I was telling my countrymen, don't worry, 1940, 41, you see America will come. Oh, Pierre, you say America is too far, they don't care about us. I said, you'll see. And, I was bragging so much that it came to the Gestapo, apparently. So anyhow, I was giving a little business like this, false papers, identity, and anybody that wanted to have escaped prisoners, communists who had to hide, Jewish who had to change their identity. I made more Frenchmen out of the Jews. I gave them French names like Dupont, Dubois, and I had a false cachet, you call it stamp. Because in France, you see, when a child is born, he goes to three different places. Not only the city hall, it goes to the court and another place, the sous-prefecture, I don't know how you call that. So in case of something happen, there's always another place you can have your birth certificate. But during the attack of France in June 1940, a couple of cities had been completely wiped out, and the three places had been bombed. So you couldn't find any trace of that. So it was easy to make a stand.
Oh, so these were birth certificates
Any kind of paper that you needed. Identity papers, food, ration, you have to get your birth certificate and the place of birth.
How were you able to manufacture these documents?
Very easy. You had them at your disposal.
From the city hall?
From the city hall. Mm-hmm. All I had to do is to find a stamp with a name that was impossible to trace. Mm-hmm. And we knew them, through the underline, Mm-hmm. So all these people were all born in the same place mostly. Mm-hmm. They couldn't check. So this is what we did at the beginning. And little things like this, propaganda, for instance. I had a radio, I was listening to the BBC. That was the only communication we could have. And the BBC, of course, the German was jamming. They tried to jam the radio so you couldn't hear. But General de Gaulle was in England, and the Free French were in England, and they started to speak to us in our language. And then the BBC, of course, was also sending us messages, and Churchill was telling us to hang on, and so forth and so on. So I used to copy those messages, and then with a machine I had in City Hall, made a few copies of it, and then in my way home at night, put them in the mailbox of everybody. So trying to bring their morale up, and I would do the same for the German. I knew how to where the post office. I would put it in the post office and send to the commandanture, because we had a commandanture in every big city. You had a commandanture, which means a couple of hundred men, policemen, soldiers, and everything. So I was trying to raise the morale of the French people, and also to demoralize the German with the same. See, because we could find out how did he knows about the French, the British. So that was the job I was doing, and then I always wanted to. As it was the time, I wanted to join General de Gaulle in England, and I had an opportunity once. But when I mentioned it to my wife, she said, "No, Pierre, you can't do that. You've been separated too long." So I finally listened to my wife. I didn't join de Gaulle in England. Otherwise, I would have. So one day,
how did a Frenchman join de Gaulle in England? How would they do
that? Most of those who joined England, de Gaulle in England, were those that were outside of France when the war broke out. Others left France. I have a good friend in White Plains, by the way, who left through the Pyrenees Mountains. He was arrested by the Spanish, put in jail. Finally, he was liberated from jail, went to Gibraltar and back to de Gaulle. So it was very difficult to join de Gaulle because every harbor was but anyhow, he found a few thousand men. And so one day I was approached by a gentleman who said to me, "Mr. Troadec, we know your sentiment, we know, everybody knows that you are pro-American, and we know exactly, would you like to join me in my group?" And I said, "What is it for?" So he told me what it was. He said, "I am the chief of a group, of resistance group. I have contact with the British in Britain, and we are going to receive arms." Oh, I said, "This is serious." And now he said, "I would like to use you," he said, "because you speak English, and we have American flyers that are brought down sometimes, because Chateaubriand, you must understand, is not far from Nantes, Lorient, Saint-Nazaire. And those were harbors that the Germans were using for their submarines. So the British was coming every night and bombed Lorient, Saint-Nazaire, Nantes. And of course, a lot of those airplanes were hit sometimes by the flak. And of course, they would jump parachute and they would land someplace in the land. So the resistance was there to try to help them. So we would pass them from one group to another to another. Finally, he said, "Would you?" I said, "Yeah, sure." I was anxious to find something to do, you know. And he said, "Okay." So that was my first job.
Was the settlement in Chateaubriand at that time similar to yours?
I don't know. Well, there was That's difficult to say. Very few people express their sentiment in those days. You must realize that the French were the spirit was very low. Your country is defeated. The country is occupied. There's 2 million men prisoners, husbands, brothers, so forth. So you cannot ask these people to be all of a sudden, it takes time. No, they were, let's say, quiet. We used to have it. Our tactics was this way. There was about, in Chateaubriand, there were about maybe, coming on tour, I would say about 150 or 200 soldiers stationed there continually. Now, if you meet them in the street, you try to make them go down. You try to stay on the street, let's put on the sidewalk, and let them turn, say, like they used to do down in the South years ago. That was a tactic. Or ignore them completely. So they had their cafe. They had 1 or 2 cafes that just for them. We never went there. So this is the way you show them. You don't have to. It's the way we show them that we didn't care for them. They were correct, I must say. During their time, the troops, the Wehrmacht, because it's difficult to explain. There was two kinds in the German army. The Wehrmacht, that's the regular army. Nothing to say about them. Correct, at least in appearance. Then you had the SS. That's a different kind altogether. But at the beginning of the war, the occupation of France was mostly the Wehrmacht.
Was there SS where
The
you...
SS were mostly sent to the Russian front because they were really the top fighting troops, but dedicated 100% to Hitler. You couldn't fool around with an SS. Oh no. There was no such a thing as trying to ask for mercy with an SS. He was dedicated to Hitler to the limit of his life. Nothing. He committed the most atrocities that were committed by the SS. And I say that because sometimes when you say Germans, it's not that I want to excuse the German people, because they were, let's say that 99% of them were for Hitler. But I don't think that the German people, if they had known what happened at the end, would have said, no, I don't think they would have accepted that, because I respect their intelligence. It's a country that has produced, as you know, a lot of scientists, a lot of writers and poets and musicians. So I've always said to myself, no, it's impossible. The only reason why they followed him is because Hitler gave them so much. Everything he promised, he kept his word. He said, I'll occupy Austria, I'll do this, I'll do that. Everything that he said he did, and everything succeeded. So automatically, you cannot blame 100% these people for having followed Hitler. But the Wehrmacht was different. The Wehrmacht was commanded by regular army officers. They had not pledged allegiance to Hitler, but they had to follow orders. So I always make a difference between, I hope people don't think that I'm anti-German, because I'm not. I'm anti-Nazi, and I will always be, because I know what Nazi fascism is, but I will not put the blame on the people of Germany, regardless of what they did. So I became involved with in Chateaubriand and the Resistance, and my job was mostly recuperate those American soldiers.
Did you work with a group, or were you individually?
I was in the group, but most of the time I was alone. I was the only one that really could take care of these guys, because I was the only one that spoke English. So when we knew we were warned by other groups, 50 or 100 miles away from that, at a particular time, a particular day, at a certain time in the train, there would be 2 Americans. And there's some kind of password which I can't remember, but anyhow, you can recognize an American anytime, or in French, and so it went fine. I think I had one Canadian and 1 British among them. But there was never any conversation between us. I would see that, I would give the password, they knew. I said, just follow me, okay? But there was really never a conversation between me and them, except maybe just follow me, and it's nice, because you had to be very careful. That time was full of Germans, and also gendarmes and Gestapo. So you had very careful. So I just said, follow me, and they would follow me, and we would through the town, and there was a place, a certain place where so all I had to do was to point to that first house over there, and that's it. They would go, and that's about the only relation I had with them. And then one day, in August 1943, I was picking up two Americans. And I remember it was on a Wednesday, it was a market day, because in Chateaubriand we had the market, farmers used to bring the cows and so forth and so on, so it was memorable. I could remember the day. And as I came to those two Americans, very recognizable, they were trying to, I don't know who had given them the uniform, but they looked so much American. It was, one had a beret, he wanted to look French, and he smoked an American cigarette. I said, "No, please take that out." He said, "Why?" I said, "Don't you see? There's no such a thing as American cigarette. You're going to be detected right away. The smell of a Virginia tobacco is so different from the French or the German." So he didn't realize they were not very educated in regard to that. I said, "Okay, throw that away." And so we come out of the station.
Is this daytime or nighttime?
Daytime. Early afternoon. Yeah, early afternoon, because the market was over about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, as I come out of the station, I said to them, I said, "Listen, fellows, just follow me. Something is not too good around." I could see the German guard, the gendarme, Feldgendarme, they call him. I said, "Jesus, what happened?" I said, "Follow me." So luckily in France there's a lot of cafe. You can always go and have a drink someplace, you never. So we stopped in a cafe, and then I introduced myself. I had to, because and they also told me, one was a lieutenant, he was a pilot, the other one was a sergeant, was a gunner, and had been gunned down around Lorient already a few weeks before. So I introduced myself, and I said, "Listen, let's talk, because we can go out. You see, there's too much, they're watching too much." So I told them, I don't think I gave them my last name. No, because I gave my first name. And then, as we spoke, I said, "Listen, fellows, if you will ever go back to the States, I would like to ask you one favor. Go see my in-laws in New York, because we've been, that's in 1940. 4 years already that we have no news from my father and mother-in-law who were living in New York. And just tell them that we are okay. They will understand." So we made all these arrangements. They promised they would do it, and they did. I learned that later on. And so finally the gendarme left. I said, "Okay, let's go now." So we went the same route as we usually do, through the town. And as I approached toward the city hall, another cordon of soldiers asking papers to everybody. Then I said, I knew there was something wrong someplace. They must have known about those two guys, I suppose, because it never happened before. I never had been arrested, never been, and we were about less than 50 yards away from them. So I couldn't explain to this guy what was wrong. I don't think they're going to explain. I said, "Follow me." Luckily, again, there's another cafe on the left side. We entered the cafe, and we ordered some drink, and then I looked through the windows, and we waited for about an hour. They were checking everybody. Imagine if I had come with those two guys. I don't know what would happen to them, but to me, I was shocked. There was no in between. If any support to any flyers, any enemy, you were shot. Or
Did you see this happen?
Beg your pardon?
Did you see this happen?
Oh, it happens hundreds of times. This is part of the whole story. It has happened so many times. Or you are taken hostages. And if something happened, you are taken as an hostage. So it was very strict. You had in every town, you had panels telling you the consequences of your act. If you were caught hiding a Jew, if you were caught with arms, if you were caught helping an enemy, which means American or British or what, death at the end, told. So you knew the result. So anyhow, after waiting for a little while, I finally see the German disappear, and I said, "Okay, let's go, fellows." But during that time, we had a time to talk a little bit, you see. introduced to one another. We had time. So finally we left, and I drove them to the same place as I used to. There was a family there. They were the one that was taking care of them. And then we would send them to another group and some other group. And that was in August 1943. We also had to, our group had to find places where to parachute those arms, because we were receiving arms from England. Machine guns, grenades, everything that we, in case when the liberation would come, because we were all expecting that one day we would be liberated and we would not participate in the fight. But I told the chef, my commanding officer, his name was Monsieur Lieutenant, I said, Monsieur Lieutenant, don't you think you make a mistake by receiving arms? We're only 1943, and you know, I know the sea. I've been at sea all my life. And I said, after a time, after June, July, you have the equinox, the sea is too rough, and I don't see any possibility of landing in that period. Then he said to me, I said, Mr. Troadec, I know, but if we don't accept the arms now, we'll never have them. And I said, you know, Mr. Lieutenant, we're taking a big chance, because you're going to have to hide those things. But that was it. He had his mind made up. He was the chief. We pay big price for his mistake. But anyhow, so our group, we had to find a place where to land those damn containers. So our group would take a few men, we'd go out in the countryside and find a field big enough to make a drop zone. That's part of our group. But then when you had done that, you couldn't keep it for yourself. You had to tell the farmer, because you couldn't drop things from the sky without the farmer knowing about it. That's already one thing. Another person knew about it. God knows what happened between a farmer and his wife. He must talk to her, okay? And a pillow talk, as we call it. Okay? And other people know. And so we had to hide those arms. They were big containers, you know, that machine gun dismantled, but still big, and weighed about 25, 30 pounds. Other armament, pistols, everything you need for. And so we had to dig a trench, put those things in there, and then put some wood and so forth and hide them. But the fact is that there was already too many people that knew about it. And it's 1943. And what I warned Mr. Lieutenant about, it happened. So the talk. We had 3 landings, I think it was. I didn't participate in those landings. My job was the American, but my group was doing all that. And 1943. And then, of course, by the end of, I think, October, he was arrested. Him, our commanding, the man in charge of, sorry. Of course, we got scared. I said, if he's talking about it, we won't talk. We didn't know. We were green. We were amateur, and we were dealing with pro. We said, he won't talk. He's too much, you know. He was an officer in the First World War, very strong, man, you know. He won't talk. So we didn't worry too much. Of course, we stopped the operation. There was no more landing, but I continued my little business of flying and identity card and all the monkey business I was doing. I continued, unworried. Then he was arrested in October. Then by November, we heard that 1 or 2 guys had been arrested. But again, well, you know, you're still under like here in America, you would never think of anything like that. You have the First Amendment, the Fifth Amendment. So we were not educated. We were not educated. We went into the resistance without any knowledge of what was going to happen. We should have been warned, we should have been educated, but we didn't.
Warned and educated about what?
But the consequences to avoid certain things, to avoid mistakes that we made, very stupid mistakes. And we should have learned the tactics. We should have known the tactics of the Gestapo, how they use torture to make you speak. So we would have been, at least maybe we would have saved a lot of people, but we didn't know. So December come. his son was arrested. He was my best friend. And January 18 or 19, my turn came.
44?
Yeah, 19. June, Jacqueline, no, she was there at the time. Jacqueline was arrested at the same time because I told you she was living in Chateaubriand, Jacqueline. I was married to Germaine.
Right.
Jacqueline was there. She was single at the time. She was only 20 years old. I was married. I had a little girl and a little boy after that. It's two.
By the way, did your wife know about your activities? Was she aware?
More or less, she knew a little bit, but she didn't participate in anything. So that's why she was not arrested. Otherwise, if she had participated with me, she would have been arrested, regardless she had children or whatever. No, she knew vaguely, you know, and I used to say a few words here and there, but she would have unable to say what I was doing exactly. She knew I was working at CTO, she knew I was doing ration card and identity card and something like that, but the rest, no, she didn't know. And so, on the 18th, I think it's January, yes, 18, we had celebrated my little daughter's birthday on the 17th. And then on the following night, around midnight, I knew I was going to be arrested. I could feel it. I could feel it because in the afternoon, one of my buddy, one of the fellows who used to work with me at the city hall, he had left, and he was called at the commandanture. And for certain reason, they didn't tell him why he was called at the commandanture, but he had to go because he was the guy who was maintaining the relation between the commandanture and the city hall. So I didn't pay too much attention for the fact that he was called at the commandanture. But I was surprised that by 5 o'clock he wasn't returned. And then that particular day I had 2 false cars on me. I had met 2 guys that were escaped from Germany, prisoners of war that had escaped from Germany. And they were in Chateaubriand, but they had no papers. So, of course, l'Américain, Pierre Troadec, the American, go to see Mr. Troadec, he'll fix it up. Okay. So I was making false paper for those 2 guys, a new identity. And I had a meeting with them, I met them in a cafe, and as I met them, I remember there was some mistake. I don't know if it was birth or some mistake or something. I said, okay, fellows, I'll meet you then tomorrow night, same place, and I'll bring you the papers correct. Everything will be in order. Okay. I went back home with those 2 cars with me. And then at midnight, all over the place, the banging my door, banging the windows. I was expecting it. It seems funny, but that seems strange. The other fellow wasn't home, wasn't come back, and I remember very well, I had the impression, and I said, Pierre, you went too far, sometime you're going to be in trouble. But where it would come from, I didn't know. But I knew that I was very close to trouble. And so when it happened, my wife was surprised, but I was not. I tried to see if I could escape somewhere. I went up the attic. I looked around, there was soldiers all over the place, about 25 soldiers all over the place, circling the whole house. And then they were hitting the door. That was the Gestapo. Soldiers around, but then there was Gestapo, dressed in civilian clothes, like typical Frenchmen. That's the trick, you see. They would speak their language, they would dress like the type of people that they were living with, and knew everything about the whole thing. And you wouldn't recognize them really, because they were picked, by the Gestapo men were picked to a certain place where they would look and act like the people of the country. So you had no idea who they were. They would be sitting in a cafe and you talk with another friend, he's listening to everything. That's the way it was going. So anyhow, they came and banged on the door, it was gun and everything, and he was looking for arms. What do you mean arms? I was raising my hand. Well, the arms, a pistol, I said, I don't have anything, which is true. I wasn't that stupid. I didn't carry anything in my house. So they entered the house, they put the house all upside down, and my wife was trying to tell them that my husband is innocent. I said, Jean-Marc, I was going to say shut up because you don't know. But anyhow, poor woman, she was all excited. And then my children, one woke up, my son, the little one, and he started to cry. They were turning the place all over. They were looking under the bed, they were opening all the doors. And so my daughter slept the whole thing. She never heard nothing. Even to this day, she doesn't remember. And she was the oldest. Monique was 4, Yeah, Jean-Pierre was about 18 months old. So anyhow, they hold everything down. And then all of a sudden they said, okay, come on tour, just for talk, Get dressed, warm. You know, it's in January, it's very cold, so I said to myself, this is it, Pierre, this is the end, you're not going to come back. And as I put my suit on, all of a sudden I realized that I had those two false papers on my jacket. And I think if they find this, then these two guys are going to be arrested. And they're innocent. They escaped prisoners, but I mean, so as they were looking over, I took those two things out of my pocket, and I threw them on the table, so I covered up with a piece of paper. My wife noted that she had seen me, and anyhow, these two guys were not arrested. So I said goodbye to my wife, of course, and they didn't give me a chance to see my children. They didn't let me a time to say goodbye. And they took me to the commandant tour, the whole gang, about 20, 25 guys. I mean, I think I was a very important VIP. So anyhow, as we reached the commandant tour, who do I see? My wife. They said, who's here? She's been arrested before me, about an hour before, and she was already there. But we had nothing to do together. She was in a different group altogether. I didn't even know she was in the resistance. We were working the same, but I never knew what she was doing. I had to learn long after, that she belonged not to the same group. Mine was a British outfit for British buckmaster. Her was a French group, I suppose. And well, that's about midnight, 1 o'clock. And more people come in, more people, more arrests. The house was full. It was a big room like this one here, and by 2 o'clock, there was about, 30, 40 of us in there. And gradually, interrogation. So when my turn came to be interrogated on 3 o'clock in the morning, I enter a room. The light was on, but as I enter the room, I see two guys, and I recognize the fellow that has arrested me. He looked at me, come close to me, and shut the light, and I'm in the dark. And I could feel his breath next to mine. Where are the Americans? In French, they were talking French fluently, just good as, like me. Where are the Americans? Because my reaction, I don't know. I didn't know how during that time, before I was interrogated, I didn't know where they were going to start. You don't know. When you're in an interrogation like that, you don't know what they know, what they don't know, where they're going to start. And the first thing he says, close to me, where are the Americans? Now, I didn't know where they were. Because after they left, after I told them to go to that house, that's it. I was free. I didn't know what happened to them. That was months before. This is January. And the last one I saw was in August 43. So I thought I was right by saying, I don't know. And you repeat, where are the Americans? And I kept saying, I don't know. And then all of a sudden, I'll use a language in French. He puts the light back again. And he said, you don't know your son and son's when I call him. And he started to hit me round in my stomach, then in my jaw, then everywhere. You don't know, huh? No, I don't. And he said, what were you doing on Wednesday, August or so forth with two Americans? Oh, then I have to back out. Oh, I looked surprised. And now you remember. Then he says, I'm going to have more details. So he started to hit me like that. Was coming all over the place. But I remember trying to avoid my face after a couple of times, but mostly in my stomach and twisted my arm. Where are they? I don't know. Where are they? Stupid, because I didn't know. Frankly, I didn't know. But then I had to admit that I had been with those two Americans, because he knew it. And so then he opened the door, and he said to the guard, bring... So he was the friend that was arrested at 1 o'clock, the one that left the city hall and didn't come back at 5 o'clock. His face was blue all over the place. And I say, you talk to him, and you tell him what's going to happen to me if he doesn't talk. So he looked at me, but he was looking rather on the floor. He said, Pierre, tell everything you know. He said, because, you know, you're going to be... but I said, what? I said, what? Then they shut the door. They brought him back. He said, you listen, you heard what he said, huh? If you don't talk. I said, I cannot tell you anymore because I don't know. You admit that you had... Yes, I say, I know, because you know, I admit that I had an American that day. I didn't tell him I had many before that because he didn't know something about it. I said, I know, yes, I was true. Wednesday on Augusta, yes, yes. But what are they? I said, I don't know. But where did you put them? Now, I was prepared for that. Because the house, I sent him to there was a little street, a little road like this, and there was a main road like this. So I said, I left them here. I didn't tell him they were there. I said, I left them here at the cross. There was a road going south. I left them there. I wished them good luck, and I said, you go south this way, south towards Spain and everything. So he started again to hit at me, and I stuck to my story. I couldn't come back, because if I come back, then God knows what would have happened. But I knew deep down that if he had known where they were, he would have beat me up the way he did, because there was no use. So I stuck to my story. I was lucky. If he had put me to more torture, I could have been able to, but I never told them where they had been, but they knew about it. They knew. So anyhow, we were taken the following day. As I remember, as I left him after he hit me so much, it's a big house. There was a kitchen, a couple of soldiers there, Wehrmacht. Not SS, Wehrmacht. That's when I said they're different. Who were really ashamed of what was going on, but they could do nothing. And one of them said, "Café, café." And I said, yes, I'll take a cup of coffee. See, he gave me a cup of coffee that was a little better. And we stayed the whole night. And the following day, they brought a truck. And they took us, Jacqueline. She was the only woman, by the way. There was a bunch of men. And we couldn't sit, so I said, we'll sit on my lap. It's funny, you know, it is. She would sit on my lap, and we made about 50 miles on the truck, and she was sitting on never knew that's 20 years after she came my way. So anyhow, we went to Nantes. Nantes is a big city, and we were put in jail there. And then we were interrogated again, and that really tough, really tough. They want to know, they want to try, it's like a sponge. They want to have the last drop of you. They want to try everything. They torture you, anything. I was lucky because they probably realized that I didn't have any, they didn't know anything about my participation in the group of the landing of arms. That I didn't know, luckily, because, but at the time that we were arrested, if we had been arrested, let's say 3 or 4 or 5 months before, most of us would have been shot. But the fact that it happened in the beginning of 44, they knew that the resistance was coming stronger and stronger, and there were so many people in prison that they couldn't shoot everyone. There would have been maybe a revolution among the population. So instead of that, they sent us to concentration camp to die, and a slow death, but not. So we went to Nantes. I was with a bunch of guys that were really tough guys, but torture. They used to come at night, 10, 11 o'clock when you're half asleep and the jail opens and they give a name, so-and-so and so, up. So the guy goes up and then he comes back around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. He has his face the torture they went through, if they have any idea that you were important in your group, it all depends. If you were just a little guy, they wouldn't, but if you knew that you had, they extracted much of you, and anything was good. With women, too, this is a true story. A friend of mine, whose wife was arrested, M. Bernier, he, very, very beautiful, strong man, and he didn't want to say anything. He told his story, he didn't want to do it. And in order to make him speak, they brought his wife, and they put on her breast, twisted her breast all over, and she cried, and she yelled, and he told me, Pierre, I suffer. But I said, I didn't, and she didn't. By putting in front of you your wife and torturing her wife, he said maybe he's going to give up, he's going to, that's the torture, or bring a baby. These are true. The people who went through we tell one another our stories afterwards, bring a baby, for instance, and let the baby cry, and you're next and a woman or the man, you listen to a baby crying, you give up. You say, okay, I can take it. I say, this is the torture that went through. And of course, I can mention electro in your genitals and all kinds of things, but good in order to extract as much, because they knew that sooner or later there's going to be a second front, that the American would land, but they didn't know where, and they probably thought that we knew, the true resistance, and the torture was very, very severe, very hard.
This is what you experienced in that prison?
Some of my friends, not mine. The second one was, I would say, mild. Let's put it this way: a couple of hit, a couple of this. But I think they extracted as much as they could from me. And lucky, I was lucky because they didn't know about my participation in the landing. That my group was there. So as far as I was get rid of my prisoners that they admitted. I admitted that yes, I've seen it, but they realized that I didn't have any more connection with them, that I didn't know. Even if they'd killed me, I would have been able to tell them. I said, true, I didn't know what they were. It was 6 months. So anyhow, then we were sent to another, from Nantes, sent to Angers, which is another town. And in Angers, we spent another couple of weeks there. And I tried to escape, but I couldn't make it. See, that we had what do you call handcuffs in the back instead of. If it had been in the front, it could have been done. Because Angers, I had a lot of family living there. I had 2 aunts and a lot of cousins in the town, and I knew that if I could manage, I could make it. But unfortunately, with my hands on the back, I just couldn't open, do nothing. The guy was alone. The driver was all alone. He was taking us to the Gestapo in Angers. And that was it. And for a moment, I thought he was going to have an accident. I thought he was going to hit a trolley car that passed in front. I said, gee, my gosh, if I had my hands, my front hands, I would have been able to open the door. And knowing Angers as I did, and knowing my aunt and cousin, I would have been able to manage, but I couldn't make it. So I was interrogated again there. And then a funny story, because sometimes there's funny things that happen in life. I was afraid in Angers I was going to be interrogated again by the one in Chateaubriand, the one that hit me so much. And I saw him in the yard. I said, boy, if he was, this time he's going to give it to me again. Luckily, no, it wasn't him, it was another guy. This guy was particularly, I saw something that was very important. There's a young girl coming in, we used to call them the souris blanches, the white mice, because the German uniform was white for those girls. She was probably a secretary, I suppose. I never knew exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
on the next stage.
They're just going to change the tape,
Yeah, okay,
so we'll
yeah.
pick up with that
Yeah.
The white mice.
detail.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I remember.
Yeah.
That's funny. Now it's funny. It's not. Yes, one thing I remember, yes, I have to remember. In Angers, It's funny as you come back, those things come back. And forget a lot, but many things come back.
Pretty quiet on the back.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in Angers, I was put in a cell with another fellow whom I never met him before. And we start talking and about the situation. He said, they beat me so much. And he took his pants off and he shows me the mark on his behind. He said, look what they did to me. I'll never forget. Shows me his behind. So anyhow, I met him months after in concentration camp. I said, I remember you showed me your behind. So anyhow, I go up the room where the interrogation took place. And the guy, he was an SS, but he didn't look like the first one. He didn't have that tough look. And he sat down, and he puts me a lot of papers in front of him. He says, this is what you have said in Chateaubriand. He says, now I have to find something, and he started over again. And I said, well, I've told everything. He didn't, again, I was afraid that he was going to talk to me about arms, and I would have been really in trouble there. No, he mentioned about the Americans again, and same answer. But while he was talking to me, I saw that pretty little face coming in, and I see him looking at her. I said to myself, there's something, I could see the way they looked at one another. There was something going on between the two. Well, I didn't know, but so he was not really minding his business with me. I think he had other things in his mind. So instead of pushing it, he was sitting at his desk, and in front of, there's two pictures, Hitler, and the other guy, I don't think it was Goering or what. And the picture was in such a way placed I could see them. And he says to me, well, I have a lot of means to make you talk, but in a nice way, I said, yes, I've been through it already. I said, I know you can, but I said, tell you the truth, I have no idea what these Americans are. And the conversation went like that, and she came back another twice, once or twice, and again the smiles and everything. I said, this is something funny. And he said after it was finished, okay, he took a piece of wire like this, a gumi as we used to call it and it's a bend down, abandoned on his desk like this. And he started with his gumi, and he gave me a few, but not the strong like I was expecting, just like this. It's a joke. I don't understand, and I'm facing Hitler and Goering in front of me, and this guy is, okay, and he stopped, goes back his gumi on his desk. He said, okay, sign this. It's written in German. I don't know what I'm signing my death sentence. I signed my name, and that's it. So back to myself. And then we had, before we left Angers, we were a medical examination. And this is the most hypocritical thing that you can imagine. Because it's so hypocritical, but they were preserving for the future. And this is what I mean. When we talk, we cannot say exactly, but we know that how much hypocritical the whole system was. We're supposed to pass an examination. Well, if you do, what do you expect? If you're sick, okay, you're going to be taken care of, or you're going to be expelled from. Okay. We were naked, and in front of me is an old general, a French general, who has been wounded so severely in the First World War that his body was completely distorted, just like this. He had wounds all over, but he was a real patriot. He was right in front of me, General Hugo, his name come back. And the German officer in charge of medical, supposedly medicine, I don't know if he was really a doctor or not, but he had a white coat. And he was examining, he didn't even examine you. He looked at you and, okay, sit like this, okay, just like that. And when the General Lugan approached him, he put himself at attention, like a real soldier. And he gave his name, General Lugan. So many wounds, so many citations. Didn't impress the major and the doctor. He looked at him. Good, okay, let's go, something. Another friend behind me only had one leg. He had been wounded in 1939. Was working with me. Had one leg. He had a wounded leg. Same thing. So you see the hypocrisy. Why? To show later that they were, taking proper care of people, that they were examined. Like all the list that I gave you, it doesn't say how we died, how they died, where they died. No, just simply date of birth, etc., etc. Everything was like that. You never knew in advance what was going to happen. And that's why many people say, well, how come you couldn't revolt? You couldn't revolt because you didn't know what the next step was going to be. You always believed that, at least when I saw that poor fellow general, but 80 years old, I would imagine that he would be taken with us. No? And my friend Ferdinand, back again, yeah, he's been wounded, he has only one leg. How can you? So then I began to think that things were more serious than we had expected. That's when I realized that we hadn't been told how to do our job that we did. I realized that we had a lot to learn, because when I saw that, so they put us back in our cell, and by the middle of January, February maybe, they took us on a train to Compiègne. Compiègne is in the north of France.
Can I ask you a
Yes.
question at this point? Do you know anything about concentration camps, anything about death camps, anything about labor?
No. 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 Nobody knows about it. Nobody knows about concentration camps. We have a vague thing that they deport people to Germany, but in what capacity? No. To tell you frankly, we didn't know nothing about it. So, in the train, and it shows you, I remember we were in a special train, with bars all over, and handcuff again, from Angers to Paris. We spent 5 hours in a railroad station in Paris. 5 hours. Thousands of people pass us by. We used to show our handcuff, hoping maybe they're going to come and we were passing by. They didn't know we were handcuffed criminals. Well, what the hell was it? You see guys with handcuffs, and so nothing happened. During those 5 hours, we saw a young couple kissing one another. We see husband and wife with their children, and we were there and waiting. And said, Jesus, there's only a handful of them would come and take us out of here. But it didn't happen. So we went to Compiègne, and between Paris and Compiègne, it takes about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And the guy who was guarding us was an Alsatian. He was born French, but he was an Alsatian, so he was in the German army. He was a nice guy. So he told us, but not entirely the truth. He says, you're going to be taken to Compiègne. He says, that's why I used to serve in the French army when I was French, because I was surprised. He spoke French to us. He said, I'm not from Alsace. I have a son who is in the Russian front. And he said, you're going to be taken, but he didn't tell us after that what was going to happen. So he said, listen, fellas, if you have any messages that you want to send, we still had, at the time we had pencils and pieces of paper. He said, give me a note and I'll send it to your family, I'll manage. It was nice, So we did, a note, address, we put him in his cartouchière, and we learned later on that some of them had received a message, but we didn't know where we were going, actually. So there was a few escape between Paris and Compiègne. Some guy managed to make a hole and jump, and finally made it. So we didn't say nothing. We could see them jump, the train stopped at every station. Up, one guy stopped, another guy stopped. We didn't say nothing. And then all of a sudden, they had to find out, right? A few missing, 5, 6 missing. So then they really got mad, really drunk. So our guard, the Alsatian, he said, no, it's not one of you. No, I said, we're all there. He said, the guard, the next guard, is going to be sent in the Russian front. Because he missed, he didn't do his duty. So anyhow, I put handcuffs again, and we arrived in Compiègne late at night, and we were sent to Compiègne was an internal camp, let's put it this way. It used to be an army camp, so as my book shows in the picture here, it was really not a concentration camp. You were prisoners, you had barbed wires, you had a watchtower, you had that, but no. You could receive packages, you could send a letter to your family, and we spent about 4 or 5 weeks there. And another hypocrisy, everything was done like this. They would tell you, you're going to go to Germany, okay? It's cold over there. Tell your families to send you warm clothes, new if possible. And so, of course, our poor wives, they sent us the best they could find. I had underwear, I had the warmest clothes she could send me, the poor woman. We never saw them, anyhow, because when the packages arrived, I had asked my wife, because I said to myself, well, if I go to Germany, if I'm a prisoner of war, my gosh, that's not, it's not terrible. I can learn German. And I said to my wife, why don't you send me a grammar, a method of French and German? She did. See? But they opened the package in front of me. First thing he did, censure, okay. Okay, I saw my book, go and then I saw it again. Then cloth, he said, you have them later. Then he gave me whatever food my wife had sent me. Never saw the cloth again. But they had those cloths. A mountain of suitcase the day we left. Because after we stayed about 3 or 4 weeks in Compiègne, and then one day a transport. So they call you your name. So we were about, I would say, 1,500 men. The following morning, they gave us a piece of a round bread, and I think a piece of sausage or something like that. But our suitcase, everything, we never saw them. They were in the yard, mountain of them. 1,500 men with 1 or 2 suitcases each, imagine. It's about 2,000-3,000 suitcases full of good clothes. Okay?
Were these people that were with you at this time mostly French resistance?
Yes.
Political?
Oh, yes, yes. Most we were all French then.
Mm-hmm.
Later on we were mixed, but most, I would say, 80% resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to make a straight point. There's also a few guys that were arrested, like pimps, people had been caught doing black market with the Germans, and then a few of them. But I would say that the majority, at one degree or another, we were resistance poor people, one way or another. We had done something, some more than others, but anyhow, yes. And you had all kinds of people, a lot of priests, a lot of policemen, a lot of generals, like admiral, politicians, former ministers, deputies, senators. It was a mixture of every society, French society, workers, mailmen, arrested with their uniform on, the priests with their uniform on. It was a fantastic combination of mixed population. So when they decided to leave on the 22nd of March, we spent the night standing up. There was no room to sleep. And they gave us a piece of bread and a piece of sausage. And we had a clothes on, heavy clothes because it was cold in January. And I had an overcoat. And then by 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, out, okay? We saw the mountain of suitcase, and we left. And we crossed. Compiègne is a town of maybe 30,000 people. That's where the armistice was signed in the First World War, by the way, Compiègne. That's where the Germans surrendered to the Allies in 1914, and that's why Hitler took the surrendering of the French in 1940 as a combination, Compiègne. And as we crossed the town, everything is quiet. Not a person, every shutters are caught. Yes, 5 o'clock in the morning when we left the camp to go to the railroad station. The town, every shutters is closed. But behind those shutters, we could see people, watching, looking at us. We're not supposed to talk, not supposed to say anything. The whole town is shut. And we have guarded every on the right and on the left with the troops, machine gun ready and everything. And also some Italian militia, I remember was there. Anyhow, when we arrived at the railroad station, they had a few people that were closed in, but through the people I could recognize a few people from my hometown. And they recognized us, but we couldn't talk to them. And in the station there was a long, big train waiting for us. Cattle car, not cattle car with a roof, but wagon, could you call railroad car. And by about 100 each in front of each car. Okay. And I stopped. I was the last one before last. So we stood at attention before the door opened. And as I turned to my right, I see a machine gun on the last wagon, on the last boxcar, and on the left and one on the right. Oh, it's serious. Anyhow, the order came to embark. We went to embark into the train. I managed to be one of the last ones to enter the car. We were about 100 in each car. And those cars are made for 40 people in case of war. That's what, we were about 100. With our clothes on, it's like 150. I managed to sit alongside the wagon. But those who were in the center, imagine what they went through. Those who were weak. It was the most awful thing. Among all my experience, I think one of the worst was the transport. Finally, as the train moved around 6:30 in the morning, it was daybreak, all of a sudden, the whole train, we start singing our national anthem. never heard it so beautiful. I hate the Marseillaise in other situations, because it means, but in that particular time, the whole town must have heard us, miles and miles away. Many 1,500 men singing, because we really realized, we began to realize that something unusual was cooking, because the attitude changed right there, already when they pushed into the train. We could see right away the change of attitude. And so the train left, and we sang for quite a while. And around noon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we could hear the machine gun on the back. Bum, 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 bum. We knew that some guys had managed to escape. And it was difficult because those trains are, the wood is very thick. And we had been searched before we left, but we still managed to have either knives in us with a little saw, and some guys managed to escape. How many exactly, I don't know. But we can hear pum pum from the machine gun. I've met since the war, I met one man that escaped that was in that French war, and he was alive. He was working in a restaurant in New York. He jumped. He was one of those who jumped. Maybe 7, 8, I don't know exactly. But anyhow, by around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when it began to be dark a little bit in the winter, we were approaching the German border. We were in Alsace, I suppose. First, I must tell you there was no sanitary. If there was, we couldn't reach it. And we were it was so hot and warm, with our clothes on. So they stopped the train. I don't know exactly where, but anyhow, in the border in Alsace, I could see because the house in Alsace are different from the one in France. There was similarity with the German mostly, because Alsace was German for many, many years. And they told us to get out of the car. So we got off. 1,500 guys out on the ballast on the wagon. And then they started searching those wagons that had holes in it, and they tried to see if they could manage to escape. So they find that there's 1 or 2 wagons that were really, ready to be wagon. So they took away the guys that were in there, and they mixed them up with all the rest of us. So instead of being 100, we were maybe 120 after that. But then came the order to take our clothes off. All. So we took our clothes off, naked. And it's freezing, it's cold. After that was done, they warned us in German that if we tried to escape, they'd be killed, blah, 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 and so forth. Anyhow, we went back into those wagons, but as I said, instead of being 100, we were about 110, 115, and it was worse. And then, of course, we were naked, and we start, that's Wednesday, the 22nd. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, nothing to eat, nothing to drink, no sanitation, nothing. Perspiring, our body was, because the temperature of our body, you have it in here, you see. It shows horrible. Guys were getting crazy, those who were in the center. I was lucky because I managed to sit alongside the car. So I was able to, I had nobody in front of me. The guy in front of me, we used to squeeze one another, replace one another. I would sit 15 or 20 minutes, he would sit, and then I would take that place again. But those in the center, people who are aged over 50 or weak for a reason, so they stamp on it, they crush the guys. It was murder. The whole train was getting crazy, and I thought I was going to lose. In order not to lose my mind, I said, don't say nothing. I never said 2 words during the whole thing. The guy in front of me, I never knew his name. Always, we never spoke to one another. We would replace one another, and we stayed like this until Sunday. So that's 5 days. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning, we finally, sometime we were going north, sometime we were going east, sometime we were going south. We didn't know, and nobody could find, because there was just a little opening on one side and an opening on the other side, but nobody knew exactly where we were. We knew we were in Germany someplace. Finally, we ended up in Austria. So we must have crossed, I don't know where we crossed, many. And finally, early in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, the doors open. There's a lot of guys dead in the wagon. Many completely out, and we jumped naked, and there's about this much snow in Austria. It's cold, it's even colder than France. When we jumped in the snow, and the dogs barking, and the SS hitting, and crazy, yelling, and then you have those poor crazy guys are yelling also, and then all of a sudden you hear a shot, boom, that's it, they finish them off, you know, and we stood like this in the snow for close to an hour, freezing cold, you know. And then one SS called, and he spoke German, of course, but there was always someone who could translate it. He said to us, those who are tired, there's a truck waiting for you, or a bus or something like this. Those who can't make it, because you have to walk at least 3 miles, there's a bus waiting for you. Oh, you can imagine the bus. A lot of them went into that bus. And some of them said, come on, come. And I said to myself, Jesus, that's funny. A bus. After what we've seen, something is not kosher, something is wrong. And I said, well, you do what you want, guys, but I stay here. Okay, but then they said, okay, pick up your clothes, because we could go naked to the village of Mauthausen. So they had our clothes in a boxcar, and they threw them all on the ground, and we rushed, because everything had to be rushed, you know, you had the dog and the SS. So I remember I grabbed something, I didn't know what it was, you have something, I took 2 shoes, I didn't know, I got 2 shoes, both the same fit, but big enough I could fit in there. And then what I grabbed was you know, in France the priests are dressed in a long robe. That's what I had. So I found myself dressed as a priest, back again in the rank, and you know, for these guys who went into the truck, never saw them again. So I don't know what must happen to them. Because if they're not fit to walk, if you're tired, you're probably not fit to walk, so probably they go to the gas chamber. But I never been confirmed. Yes, I know some of them went to the gas chamber later on, but I don't know what happened to them right away, whether they sent them to the camp or whether they sent them to the gas chamber the same day or the same week. That I have no idea. And we walked to the camp. That's about 3 miles. It's a mountain. Mauthausen is a small mountain, but steep, you know, especially when you have nothing in your belly and you're completely dehydrated and scared and everything. Anyhow, you have to make those 3 miles, and there's a few guys that couldn't hardly make it, you know, so we had to try to help, and finally we made it. We arrived in the camp. And as you arrive in Mauthausen, there is a big, huge door.
You can show us a picture if you want.
That says, Arbeit macht frei. Work makes you free. This is the welcome that you have when you come in and say, and as I read, I didn't understand. You see, I don't know German, but as I read this, I looked back and I saw a cadaver, a dead guy. That's a funny reception, you know. I see this, make free. Poor guy is standing there, is laying there, and so this is a picture of the car that I mentioned. See, this is a drawing at the front of us.
Hold it in front of you.
Oh, this way? Yeah. This is the way we were. This guy is still alive. When the daughters is very helpful. He works for us, our group over there. And every year he goes to those concentration camps with those young person that I mentioned to you about. This is the time. See, naked. Huh?
And the man that drew that, he was with you.
He was with me. He was he was in the following convoy, but it's the same thing. The point is, I was in the 60,000, and I think he was 62,000. So 62, he must have been the one that left a week after us. But anyhow, same thing. And see, this is when you approach from the station, you go up the village here. You know the Danube? I always thought the Danube was blue. That's not true. It's the darkest river you can imagine, at least the day I was there. Maybe it's because it was in January, but it's dark blue as yet. Well, I'm not impressed by the Danube. And this is the march. You have to carry those who can make it. And now you arrive at the camp, okay? You arrive at the camp, it's about 6 o'clock in the morning. You're dehydrated, you have nothing in 5 days, so you're stunned, eating snow until you're fed up. And now an SS comes in. You're parked, one side here, and he goes in between, and he looks, up, he picks a guy. He looks Jewish, he knows. Here, how is he here? take your pants off. See if he's Jewish. So he said, just slap him a couple of times on the face, just like this. This is the beginning. This is what we said, the mise en place, the hors d'oeuvres. You know, you're still green. You say that. Oh, that's not too much. Then behind you, there are guys working in the kitchen who says to you in French, in German, in no language, listen, if you have gold, give it to us because they're going to take it. They're going to take it. Oh, so you come on. That's another baloney. Some guys gave their ring. I did. I had my wedding ring. I kept it. Finally, the turn comes to go to the shower. Now, when you speak of showers, for those who don't know what happened, and you speak of gas chambers, usually that's in Auschwitz, not in Mauthausen. They acted all the same way. You go to the showers thinking you're going to take a shower. I beg your pardon. Yeah. See? So you enter this room, you have beautiful air, you're still a man, you look like a man. But you come out of there, after 20 minutes, you have nothing. They shave your head right away. They shave you all over. The guy with the razor, see, it shows you, he cuts your hair all over the place, and then you enter this place here, which is the shower room. That's what most of the Jews in Auschwitz were killed. And when today there are people that say it is not true, you cannot prove it because you were in it. But you know, if you were outside of it, you know very well it is true. It's impossible to deny that. So if they wanted to use gas, that's what they used to use. You were completely taken unaware. Would you know if I take you to a room and in 5 minutes I'm going to shoot you? Who could think that? Nobody could. So we were completely ignorant. But anyhow, they didn't use the gas on us, but this is the mise en place, shave completely, and then you come to your block. You know, see, you sleep on the floor, head, toe, head, toe, head, toe. This is a capo. A capo is a working, the man in charge of your barrack. Now, a capo, spelled with a K, he has all the authority, no responsibility. So that means that he's entitled to do anything and everything he wants with you. The minute you're in his hand, you're his slave, you're the victim of his temper or whatever.
Your capo.
Capo.
Tell me about him.
The capo usually was a green. What we call a green is because we had on our uniform, when I come to the capo, see, this is the start. This kid that you see here is his assistant. So the capo is in charge, but he may have 1, 2, 3 assistants. His assistants, 9 times out of 10, are young, Polish or Russian, either Jew or not Jew, but Polish and Russian. They had a lot of those kids with them that had taken over when they invaded Poland. To tell you this fun story, these kids became the women for these guys. They used them as prostitutes. The reason is because this guy here, he steals part of the food that we are supposed to get. Parts of our bread, parts of our margarine, sausage, whatever, potatoes, he steals it for him. As a master of pictures to present here, you can see his loaf of bread here. He's stealing this. See, bread here. So he's fat, he's in good shape, physically and sexually, of course, because he's stealing from us. We have a ration, a daily ration in a concentration camp, and this is all the camps about the same. A piece of bread, about 2.5, no, in the morning, a cup of hot water. They call it tea or coffee, but it's nothing pure water, nothing is. That's all you have at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. When you arrive, quarantine, when we go quarantine. At lunch, a bowl of soup. But by soup made of God knows what. If you're lucky, if you have a piece of potato, peas and everything goes in it, beets, offal, everything. Sometimes if you like a little piece of meat in between. But it all depends how the guy with the leather goes. If he goes to the bottom, fine, you're solid. If he goes to the top, you have liquid. There's nothing you can say. He's the boss. He's the one that does that. And then at night, a piece of bread, 3 ounces of bread about, and a small slice of margarine, or a small slice of sausage. A sausage that looks, we always, as Sir King will agree with me, thought it was made with dog meat, because it was pinkish. It was not color of a sausage, you know. But anyhow, this is what you have. So you see, this guy is full of food. He's so sexually easy. So that's what he has, those kids. And those kids, after a while with him, are just as bad as he is. That's a fantastic thing, you know, that we can, because to save their life. If they're thrown out of there, then they may die. So in order to hold dear life, they execute everything that he tells them. And this is a known fact. It has happened. There was how can you say in English, a whorehouse, a border? Yeah, there was one in the camp. I could see those women, but that was not for us. That was for the couple of SS, or maybe some of those high hierarchy couple, but mostly the SS.
Tell me about your particular capo.
Oh, I had so many capos. The first capo, you have to understand fast. First of all, he wouldn't take his time to translate, or we had what we call a dolmetscher in German, it's an interpreter. Luckily, we had a good interpreter. A good man. He was fantastic. So he could translate fast, because otherwise the orders came, and if you didn't understand everything, you understand very fast with the gumi. So the gumi is now this particular capo. I have so many capos. I don't know how many. I met so many barracks, and I forgot this particular guy. Well, same thing. Get up in the morning. This is a quarantine one. When you arrive, when you're green, you have to be broken, like everything else, like a soldier. You don't send a soldier to exercise before you break him in. This is the break-in. The quarantine is the breaking in. And so you get up after, it was about 4 o'clock when you get up. Then you have to take a shower in a cold water, and seeing that you take it, and always, the gumi is always there. So you take your shower, and then there's about 400 in each barrack. 200 on each side, 200 on the other side. In between is this room here, and the shower and everything. And then there's a big stove, see, because it's very cold about it. So the big stove in the center. As you come out of the shower, you're packed. So you have to be very careful. Those who were so cold, they stood close to the stove. That was their mistake. And you have to be very fast over there. You have to think fast. Yeah. So I would say at the end of the because then you put your clothes on after you take a shower, and then they take you outside in the yard. And the yard has been so that the pavement is unequal, and your shoes don't fit in your feet. You see, it's no way of tying your shoes. So you break your neck. They tell you, go up, go down, go up, exercise, in, boom. And you have no way. The damn thing goes off your feet. You try to grab them, you fall down. That's part of the education, part of the training. And you stay in the cold after you have had your hot coffee. You stay in the cold from 5 o'clock in the morning until maybe 12 o'clock, something like that. During that time, the Stubedienst is the one that cleans the house, clean the Stubedienst. Stube means a room, a Stubedienst is the one that cleans the room. The Stubedienst have removed, if there are beds, because in some blocks you had beds, others you didn't have. When I first arrived, we had beds, but sleeping 3, 4 together in the same bunk. The bunk was about this wide, no more, 5. One here, put your feet on top of the other, and you sleep like that. Then, during the Stubedienst clean the room, they not only open the window, they remove the window so that you cannot shut them. Remove the window, put them outside, and then, after the rooms are finished, then they put you in. Now, imagine, we're on top of the mountain. It's early March, snow covered all over the place, and you're in a draft, a real draft, okay? And the wind comes and blows like this, and you are starving because you have nothing in your stomach, you haven't been fed for the last, just this. And of course, after a few days, you begin to, it starts here, So we used to be our own doctor. We used to go in each other's throat. What can you do? After a while, you guys, or it was your line, you can live that way. You know, so the draft, call. And then you would go back again in the yard for a couple of hours, and then by 5 o'clock, early, lights start to fall, the sun comes down, then it puts you back to sleep. But it's 5 o'clock, it's only 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You sleep, you can't sleep. But anyhow, you have to be in your bunk, 4 of you, like this. And then they put the music, and awful music. I hate that walk, the stars, I can't stand it no more, because they put it so loud. And you already, with all your pain and your mind, and then you have that awful music, that, so, oh, wow, that was miserable. But anyhow, that's the quarantine. I was affected to it. I had the 4 guys were the guys from Chateaubriand. 4 friends, we managed to meet together, so we say sleep together, because then we begin to be mixed with other nationalities, and that's the unfortunate thing, because there's a barrier, language barrier, there's a lot of, it doesn't go. So we had a few Polish and a few Russian, but mostly at the time we were still among ourselves, more French. So the 4 of us slept together. But after maybe 10 days, I would say, André became sick. He had been, I told you, we were naked in that train, body against body, with the sweat and everything. And that kid, I don't know, he was only 21 years old, 20 years old. He had pus all over his body. His blood was weak, I don't know, so he couldn't take it no more. So he left. So there was only 3 of us.
What do you mean he left?
He went to the Revier. I have to explain you. The Revier, R-E-V-I-E-R, Revier, is what you would call a hospital. The reason I use the word Revier, not hospital, is because to me an hospital is where somebody are taken care of, in good condition, clean, wide. A Revier is strictly a place where you stand up, you put there, and the doctor has no medicine. Sometimes he had, I don't know, you would have to speak with the doctors, because they did marvelous things. We had the greatest doctors in the world, because they were also, but they had nothing. They didn't have any radio, they couldn't take any. I remember one little Polish guy, when I'll come back to that maybe later, because it comes after. But anyhow, André left. He went to the Revier, hospital, if you want to call it. I never saw him again. Then maybe 2 weeks after, 2 weeks after, the other fellow, young fellow also, about 21, the one that was arrested in the afternoon in Chateaubriand, okay? He had in his throat, he couldn't breathe anymore, so he had to go to the Revier also. So then I'm left with another guy, just 2 of us. Fine, it's good, huh? We could extend ourselves, And it's a funny thing, because gradually you use your sense of humanity. This is what the biggest complaint that I have to make about the Nazis, is that they have made us lost our civilized ways. Mm-hmm. Gradually you become a different person, and you do things that you would never think you would, and you do it. Mm-hmm. Gradually. When those 2 guys left, they were my good friends, best friends. I was not happy because to see them sick, but I was happy because I could sleep. See, you didn't think the proper word. Normally I should have been here. I didn't know what was going to happen to them. I said, well, maybe they're going to be taken care of. Maybe it's better for them to go like this. You're ignorant. You don't know. So then I'm left with Pierre, another Pierre. So we slept like this. And then one afternoon, Pierre fainted. He fell in my arms. I couldn't make it no more. So I found myself alone. I never saw them again. Never, either one of them. So then they put me to work after we went through. Don't you survive this? Believe me, they're strong. You have to be strong. I was not smoking at the time. I was young. I was 30 years old, 34 years old, and I wanted to leave. I didn't want. So anyhow, I made it. I made the quarantine, the entire 40 days. I made it. But they put me to work outside, construction, terrassement, you call that, all kinds of odd jobs. But snow, rain, just a little bit of food that I mentioned before. Huh? So
You still wearing your monk's priest?
The priest uniform, I had to give it up after I left the shower. Oh yeah, that you have to leave because they didn't. So they give you first they give you just a shirt and another shirt, but then after that they give you a striped uniform, white and blue. So I was sent to work because they felt, well, these guys survived this. I'm sure that at 400 we started, I don't know how many were left, maybe 200 or 250. There was more than 150 that were sent to the revere. So my job consisted of all odd jobs, stupid job. Anyhow, that's the way it goes. I can tell you frankly what I did once, you probably not believe it. I was supposed to be gardening, okay, while you think of gardening, we were planting salad, okay. The SS was watching us. They brought bags that looked like phosphate, how is it, fertilizer.
Mm-hmm.
There were ashes from the crematorium from the dead. That's what we used. And we're sure of it because we could see the truck that came from the crematorium, and we know the difference between ashes and fertilizer. It's soft powder, ashes of human ashes, it's like very, very soft, like silk. And the fertilizer has a roughness in it. That's what we were using, spraying as a fertilizer for our salad. That's one part of it. I remember that part. And then I worked at some other part of the camp. And from where we are, I could see below the Revere, the famous Revere. Then I really got scared. When I saw, I was about 200, 300 feet below, and I see this guy with just a trouser and a jacket, but in a pitiful way, walking barefooted in the mud. I said, this is the Revere. Boy, don't go there. And I could see the crematorium, smoke in the crematorium, 24 hours going on. And that smell of bones, of human bones and flesh is terrible. Especially when you're eating your soup and you have it, the wind comes on your way and you have it. I still have it now. It's worse than, you've smell rubber. It's not funny, but human is even worse. It's terrible taste. And so when I saw that, I said, oh, boy, don't try not to go there. Otherwise, I could see it. It's terrible, terrible. But as I walked, I became weaker. I started to develop boils, a different part of my body. Oh, I said, I'm going to be like the rest. It's slowly. You have to. You live in what, 900 calories? Less than 1,000? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. You need at least a minimum of 2,000 from what I understand. It's a minimum. We had less than 1,000. So gradually our body, we lost our strength, we lost our... And I had this, I had many places, I see my blood is turning... And I said to myself, don't go down there. But then I said, you can stay here either, because at the rate you're going, you're going to be like the rest of your friends. So I was really in a vicious circle. I didn't know what to do and who to ask. But one night, I saw a group of prisoners there. I could see that they were old-timers already. I could see the way they dressed, the way they that you see they have more experience. So as I approached, one of them is a doctor. I see he's F here, he's French. And I told him who I am. And I said, listen, doctor, be honest, give me frankly. I have, you see, my body, I'm getting weaker. I've lost all my friends. I have 3 friends all gone. Tell me, if I go to the Revere, am I going to go to the gas chamber? He said, who told you that? Well, I said, this is but you're here around here. No. Yes and no. I said, what do you mean? He said, if you manage to go down before you're too sick, you have a chance. If you wait too long, I can't promise, because he said, I worked at the infirmary. Infirmary.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you give me your word as a doctor, as a man, as a human. He said, I cannot promise you anything, but I said, if you come down before, and he looked at me, he said, you okay? You look okay. If you come down, you may have a chance. So I debated all night long with myself. Do I, don't I? And I say, if I stay here at the rate we're going, I don't have much chance. In a few weeks, I'm gone. If I go down, he told me I have a chance, my decision is taken. I go. So the following morning, I see the Russian who was in charge of sending people to the Revier, and he gave me his okay, and I went. So that's probably the best decision that I ever made in my year and a half. That decision, and if I hadn't taken that decision, and I had nobody to ask to, nobody could give me any information, God knows where I would have been go to the Chimie like many others. And then, before I go to the Revier, which is another story, we have to tell you there is a quarry in Mauthausen. You've heard about the quarry with 186 steps. That's one thing you had to do at least once. So when we arrived, we had to make one trip to the quarry. The reason you had to do that is because Mauthausen was built in solid stone, granite, from that quarry. Quarry cut by the prisoners early in the beginning, even before the war. Mauthausen was pushed, but it was not completed. So you always had to go to the quarry and bring a stone on your shoulders. And a stone that could weigh from 15, 20, 20, 30 pounds. If you're lucky, you had a 15 pound. If you're not, you had a 30 pound. That's it. You had to put on, say, this is the quarry, the stone that you had to quarry. And you had to go up those steps, 186. Unequal, not slightly smooth step. But one was this kind of high, the other was this, the other one was like this. This is what you had to do. This is a tough, the quarry. Then I come back to this we've seen, the commando coming and going, counted and counted before, and counted during, and counted after, counted continuously. And this, they don't have to count by 5, you multiply 5 by, no, they have to count individually. And we used to make, sometime at the end, we used to advance a little bit, to confuse them. And we managed to confuse. It has to be straight. German are very, it has to be, so, and this is so, not so. Anyhow, this is the leaving, so this part of the work we used to do, all kinds of work like this. So I am at the Revier. I'm lucky. That's my luck. My luck started right there. My decision. That was a high thing I said in my life. Because as I came to the Revier, I see the doctor, the one that had told me, he's there. Oh, I said, that's good. And he has another assistant, a young Frenchman. And we were about a group of 20. And is there any Frenchman around? Because, nationality begins to play. That's the way it goes. You protect a countryman as best you can, right? So, yes, okay, I think we have 2. Okay, come here. Where are you from? Brittany. Oh, you too. How do you do? What do you have? I say, boys all over. Take a look at it. Oh, that's not bad. Well, I said, what happened? Well, he said, I'm going to give you a secret. You're going to keep that for yourself. I said, because this is your life. And I said, never mind. I don't know. He said, you want to stay here? And I said, yes. Why? I said, because here you're not going to work. Oh, I said, fine. This is it. The food is about the same as upstairs. About the same. But you don't work. You have a roof. And he said, if you're smart, if you play the way I'm going to tell you, you will have a chance. I said, what do you have to do? Well, he said, first I'm going to treat the big one. Okay, give me some yeast, yes, good amount of yeast. He said, that's going to take care of the big one. But then after that, you have to cultivate. He says, but don't let them grow in your body. He says, you have to let them grow here. And you see, if you look at my neck, I'm loaded with them. I still have them here. So he said, you're going to take some pus from one, the big one. You're going to squeeze your until you get some blood here. And then you're going to inject the pus from here, and you're going to have another one. So finally, I got rid of all the big ones, but I had a multitude of small ones all over my neck, and it's painful. But I wanted to live, and I wanted that, see? So I managed to keep my boys all over, but my body was okay. I managed to do that, because when the Revier, I come back to the Revier because I cannot say the word hospital, that is when the Revier was full, too full, and they needed space for other people coming from different commandos, because Mauthausen is in one part of Austria, but we had about 40 commandos spread all over the country. Even to the Yugoslav borders we had commandos. And these small commandos have very little means of taking care of the sick people. So they would send them to Mauthausen. So when Mauthausen was full, too much, then a selection would come for the gas chamber.
What did you see going on in the Revier?
I beg your pardon?
What did you see going on in the
In the
Revier?
Revier, give you an example. Comes back. No treatment. Remember that, no treatment. The only good thing about the Revier, if I may say so, you are living in the most horrible condition. Dirt, pus, you name it. There was a block for boys. There was another block for TB. There was another block for typhus. There was another block for this and that. Well, luckily I was in the one with those these particular things, skin and so forth. But you have the same, one blanket, if you're lucky, one blanket, never disinfected, the same pus that goes from one goes to you. Nothing, absolutely nothing. The latrine, is that the right word? The latrine where you, in the same room, where people go and urinate and do that thing, in the same room where you are, awful. Eating the same gamelle, the same miska, what we used to call, you know. You use it after a guy that maybe is sick or whatever. That's why today I don't believe in catching anything, because I know I never catch anything. Maybe AIDS, I don't think it will come to me. But we had that awful feeling of feeling completely like animals. We were not human beings anymore. You slept, the first night I slept at the Revier, I was put in a bed with another guy. He was a Frenchman, I remember. And I could see his body was full of boys, but full of it, like a ham, you know, that you put flowers on. He had boys all over his body. He was already gone. I asked him his name, where he come from. I remember he told me that he was from Burgundy or someplace. And instead of sleeping close to him, I slept on the other side so we could have more room. And probably I must have fell asleep, I don't know. Anyhow, the roll call was early in the morning, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. As the roll call came, we had to get up of our bed, or if we were too sick, we have to stand, we have to sit. So as I see the guy is not moving, so I push him, hey, fell upon. And then he doesn't move, and then I realize he's cold. He's dead, the guy. I've never seen a dead man before. I've never seen anything like it. So I call the other guy. What do I do? He says, well, bring him so he can. He's going to be counted. You are not, even if you are dead, you are not supposed to be like this. You have to, someone has to push you and make you this way. So I did, and then you come down, and then the SS card. The SS comes and counts you 2 or 3 times. It has to count. Why? You don't know, because it's the same number. So the dead man automatically, after the appel is done, then they come and relieve and pick up the dead. They put him on the floor. And then comes a guy with a pair of, what do you call it, pins or? Pliers. But he's mad with a 2 stick of wood. Check over. And if you see some roll somewhere, oh, that goes to the SS. And then the guy is removed, he's put in a little carriage, and the following day or the same day, sent to the crematorium. This is the burial ceremony. You asked me what I still remember. Well, I remember a young French boy, probably in the 20s, something like this. He had called a phlegmon. He had some kind of his throat and
a goiter?
Not a mastoidite. Mastoidite. Oh yes, his face was swollen like this. He suffered. So it was moaning and moaning all this time. So with another Frenchman, we used to urinate on a piece of cloth. And when our urine was cold, we used to take turn. When my urine was cold, I would have to put on his, so it was cool a little bit. It would relieve him for a few minutes, sometimes 10, 15 minutes. But then after that, he started moaning again. So my other guy used to come and do the same thing. But one night, he couldn't take it no more. The thing was too much. You know, he was crying too much. Anyhow, the capo in charge of the barrack with 2 or 3 of his assistants came. He was disrupting their sleep, because you had to be very careful. You could disrupt the sleep of this Madonna. You know, you had to be. So they took him. And I saw the whole thing. They took him from, he was sleeping next to my bunk. They to put him on a bed across. I watched the whole thing, the three of them. They took a pillow, one took a pillow and squeezed it through his mouth, while the other one was holding his feet, the other one was holding his hands. And then all of a sudden, my poor friend didn't say anything. He was dead. He left in front of me. What could I say? What could you do? Nothing. You had to, and every one of us that saw, probably some others saw it. I was not alone. I saw it. What could I do? Nothing. That's to come back to the revere. See, this is what you call a hospital. How could I call that a hospital? It's impossible. I can't use the word hospital. So I use the word revere because this is what it is. And so life went like that. But then, as I was mentioning before, when there was too many people in a revere, you had to make room for new arrivals. And then you had a selection. And that selection meant we knew after a while what the selection meant. You couldn't fool us. I mean, I knew. But I had to go through it like everybody else. So every Monday, you had to be naked. Naked, that's why I cannot see any naked body anymore. I've seen too many. You see, you pass in front of a so-called NSS, who is watching you. You pass by, he looks at you, and from your appearance, he doesn't look in your mouth, he doesn't take your temperature, he doesn't know whether you're sick or not. Just look at your body. And if he does that, or that's it. Your number is taken. One of his assistants takes, and your number is taken. And that's it, that you're so the following, this is on Monday, usually was the beginning of the week, Monday. Then on Saturday, the same week, all these people whose number had been taken on Monday were assembled in my barrack. And that's why I've seen it, that's why I know, and I am because I saw it. My bed was, the entrance of my block was about half the way, a big, huge door like this, and my bed was about 5 or 10 feet from that door. And so on Saturday, I saw all these guys that had been selected come in my block. That was and 5 from one barrack, 10 from one barrack. Usually there were about between 30 and 40 of them. And this poor guy was certainly just as small as I could have been. And they knew that something was coming. But it's difficult for a person to accept the fact that he's going to be to his death. Not one of us want to know that. We know that we're going to die someday, but if we're told that in an hour or two, just try to imagine what the effect it does on you. And there was no way that they were not aware of it. It was, so they would be assembled in front of me. And I remember once, a father and his son together, two Frenchmen, I remember that. And they were hanging toward my bed. And he said, have you been here long? Oh, I said, I played like if I was a veteran, I said, oh yes, I've been here. I didn't tell them that I passed the same selection the week before. I said, yes, I've been here. He said, do you know what it's going to do with us? Now, deep down, I was certain, I was sure, because I knew the following, what was going to follow. But I couldn't tell them. I just couldn't tell them. I remember this couple, father and son. I said, guys, I've been here. You're going to be sent to a camp, special camp. They're going to take care of you. And I could see in their eyes, and it really hurts me that I had to lie the way I had. But I had to. I couldn't tell them, listen, guys, in 5 minutes you're finished, you're gone. So I didn't. I said, no, don't worry, you're going to be taken care of. And sure enough, after everybody was put in the room, counting again. And I remember once there was a little Polish guy. He was there, and for one reason or another, they made a mistake, so they threw him back. He had a heart attack, the poor kid, or some kind of he was so nervous. But anyhow, he was safe. No, I don't know for what. It had been miscalculated, I don't know. Or because the Germans are like that. You need a number, that's it. So much, not one more, not one less. The number, exact. And so, at the last minute, this is what the whole thing was horrible, because this poor guy, as I just told him that he was going to take care of.
Excuse me, that's it.
Okay.
Let's start
Wait.
out of tape.
Because
We'll just change the
okay,
tape.
I mentioned that I think
again?
Jean-Marc on the call.
Okay, good.
Yes, we were, the car that comes in, yes.
Okay.
The famous car, yes, he's here. Are you ready?
Yep.
Yeah.
You are? So, these guys have been counted, as I told you before, and the time comes when the big show starts. They don't know. These guys don't know what's going to happen. I know because I'm watching that every week. So the car is not a regular, mind you. It's like a tourist car. You know those tourist cars that you see in Paris or Rome or whatever when you travel? You know, look good. This is the kind of car you do. To fool you to the end. How could you expect that something's going to happen to you when you see such a beautiful... The drivers, probably they are SS, but over their coat they have a white blue blouse, you know, with a cap, like a regular driver that takes you, a Greyhound bus or something like that. Except that the windows are blue. You can't see nothing inside. You don't know what goes on. So then, all of a sudden, an order comes. Clothes off. Take your clothes off, everything. And then you can see this. They push them into the car with a stick, like animals, like cattle that you see being in the West when you see those cattle. That's the way it started. Now, I didn't know at the time exactly where they were going, but to see that every week, I was absolutely sure that they were to their death. How, I didn't know. It could have been through an injection in the heart, like they've done many times, with gasoline, and you drop, or it could be, we didn't know. We were always learning something new. We didn't expect, but I knew, but from the way they were being packed in that car, that something terrible was going to them. And that's why I could not tell these poor guys before. Well, this is... Finally, I did a fun block again. A block is a barrack. Okay. I remember on June 26th, it's my birthday. And a friend of mine from Chateaubriand, we had decided that day that we're going to share our meal. Our meal was strictly a piece of bread and a piece of equal, but we're going to share it together. I'm going to go to his bunk, and we're going to say happy birthday like this, just like that. And I got a beating that day. I'll never forget. Because we were sleeping in layers. There was 1, 2, 3, and on top, some of them had dropped something on the floor. And the capo happens to pass by. He sees that, and he thinks it's me because I'm so close to the floor. It's me. So I got another beating, a good beating, you know, something like this. And my poor friend of Chateaubriand was watching me. Finally, I managed to go with him, and I said, well, let's have my birthday anyhow. He said, Pierre, you really... Do you remember your birthday? I said, yes, I remember my life, my birthday, 26th of June, I'll never forget. And then I was changed another barrack. I became involved with an old Frenchman, old. To me, he was old at the time. When you're 30 or 20, you feel that a person 50 is old. But he was a communist from France, and happened to be friendly with him. We talked and talked. He asked me where I was, where I came from, and so forth. And apparently, I must have been... You know, I must have pleased him for some way. And one day he says, listen, petit, he says, you see, I'm old, and I'm in charge of carrying the urine and all the rest from there, you know, carried it in big buckets like this. It's heavy, he says, and I'm getting old, and I'm going to have to be replaced. He said, would you like to do it? I said, why? By any time, tell you why. There's an extra ration, an extra piece of bread, an extra soup. Oh, when he mentioned extra, sure, I said, I'll do anything for an extra soup or an extra piece of bread. He said, okay, but communists have a way of doing things their way. He said, I have to introduce you to the party. I said, I don't care. So I was introduced. This is a true story. The French communists were there, and they looked at me, says, how old are you? And so forth. I said, you think you can? I said, yes, I can do it. The thing was, we were a group of two. We were 6 altogether. And every hour, whenever those half barrel were full of, you know, everything, you name it, we had to push a wood and then carry that, you know, outside, snow, rain, whatsoever, and empty it and then bring it back. Then we would sit for another hour because the other two would do this is our job. So the communists took me over. Says, they knew I was not a communist. So he said, well, you know the rules? I said, no, Well, he said, the rule is this. You do it, but you get an extra ration of food. Now, that food you have to eat. If you cannot eat it, you have to give it to the party. I said, but listen, I had good friends out there. No. That was the party line. That was the thing. I couldn't give it to nobody but them, and they would distribute to whoever they wanted. I couldn't leave. I said, don't worry, kid, I'm going to eat it. You don't have to worry about it. I'll eat nothing. So I was there for about 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks, I had an extra glass of milk. I said, oh, because politics, you play the game in our camps.
What about? Say something about that.
Well, you had socialists, you had communists. Would that be like here? You would have people, Democrats, Republicans, Southerner, Northerner. You would have politics playing. Politics played over there too. You had Christian, you had priests, as I told you before, and you have the communists. Now, as probably mentioned, there was 2 types of prisoners, or many types of prisoners. You could recognize a prisoner by the triangle that he had in his lapel. I think, green was the criminal, and most of the camp were run by the green, the criminal. Gradually, the politics took over with the red triangle. So whenever you had to deal with the green, you had to be very careful. But when you had a red, you had a chance of being a little more civilized, a little more. And luckily, in that barrack, he was a Austrian communist in charge of the barrack. So the French communists, Austrian communists, friendly, so that was the rule. You give us whatever you cannot eat, you give it to us, and we'll distribute it the way we want. So I said, okay, no, I'll eat it.
Was any group treated more harshly than any other group?
No. The discipline, the orders came from Himmler in Berlin, and the orders came all the way through all over hundreds of camps, the same order. The application of it, that probably made a difference. If you had a commanding officer, SS, that was a little bit more human, maybe, you could have it just a little bit, but otherwise, no. The orders were the same, the discipline, it all depends. And also the region we were in. I was in Austria, it was colder than those who were in Dachau, for instance. Dachau, Buchenwald was in the center of Germany. Probably the weather played it better, but otherwise, no, the thing was the same. Well, anyhow, they told me that, and I said, I'll eat it. So I ate everything, And one day, the order came that we're going to be evacuated. It was in July, about the 10th or 12th of July. I didn't know where we were going to go, but I knew that the communists had a strong relation. Let's put it this way, they were very close to one another. Czechoslovak or whatever, or Russian or Polish or French, they would sustain one another. So I had met these communists during my 2-3 months in the Riviera. I was friendly with them. We used to discuss politics, we used to discuss the future of France and the world, how we manage everything. We were dreamers. We were still, that was right. And I remember one day I was sleeping with a Russian, a big Russian, and a small Polish guy. And the French communists were discussing politics about the Communist Party, And I see the face of that big Russian officer. He was a soldier. He'd been captured at the beginning of the war, and he was a soldier, maybe an officer. He spoke sort of a few words of English, and he was looking at all those communists discussing. I said, what's happening? He said, he says, I remember if they knew what it is. I'll never forget it, if they knew what it is. And from him, I learned about the Gulag. Long before Solzhenitsyn wrote his book, through him I learned that the Gulag existed in the Soviet Union. So anyhow, one day we learned that we had to leave the Riviera. And I said, I spoke to my communist friend. I said, give me your number. I said, okay, I give him my number. Because they had a connection with the main camp at the Schreibstube. The Schreibstube is the office, And they probably expected to have, protection from the Schreibstube. So I gave them my number, and I felt good. I said, well, I'm going to be okay. And so I gave them another friend's number. Fortunately, my number, for one reason or another, was not picked up. So I was left alone. All the communists were in one part, and I was not selected for a reason unknown to me, but I was not. So I was left alone. I started to worry. I said, gee, where am I going to go now? So we slept all night, and then the following day, they gave us new uniform. Oh, that's good. Instead of being in a pajamas like we were, gave her a pair of wooden shoes, but at least that could fit you. They gave me a uniform, striped uniform, and also an overcoat, and a mitzel. So I said, okay, we're going to work. It's good. I felt better, because you always wonder where you're going to send you. Finally, we went down to the station of Mauthausen. A train was waiting for us. It's a passenger train this time. Passenger train. So we took it, and about Linz, I think it was, or Graz, anyhow. We unloaded from that train to go to another station to take another train. And we crossed that little city of Graz, or Linz, if it was, I don't know, and I saw something which I've never... German soldiers who had been on the Russian front and had fallen in the snow during the terrible winter of 1941-42 and had been frozen. And I could see those beautiful-looking young chap, the beautiful kid, 25, 20 years old, with arms like this. The way they had fallen, they were the same way. It made an impression, even though they were the enemies. I felt, and such young fellow. So anyhow, they took us to another train, and in the late afternoon, we arrived in a small town called Melk, M-E-L-K. And then, as I arrived, I was